Welcome to Better Business by Design with Olga Papageorgiou and Peter Metcalf. In this podcast, we discuss what really makes organizations work and why so many struggle to turn good intentions into consistent results. Through our work with leadership teams, we've seen that better performance doesn't happen by accident. It comes from deliberately designing how an organization thinks, plans, and executes. In each episode, we'll share what we've been seeing in practice, so what works and what doesn't, and what leaders can do differently if they want to design a better business on purpose. Hi everyone, welcome back to Better Business by Design, and I am joined once again by my colleague Peter Metcalf. How are you, Peter?
I'm good, Olga, really good.
Yeah?
Yeah, and yourself?
I'm well. Yeah. I don't have a nice little view outside where I stand. Maybe one time I'll do a 360 of where I stand. You've got a nice view of Melbourne City from where you are.
At the back here, yes.
Yeah, it looks nice and sunny today.
It is sunny. In fact, I'm wearing this jacket in my air-conditioned room, but it doesn't feel too air-conditioned at the moment. It's, I think we're going for 34 or 35 today. So,
wow.
And you're a Melbourne lady, so you know what Melbourne can be like in summer.
Yes.
So a bit of a hot one today, but it's good. And I must apologise too, my studio lighting is not working as well as it could do today, so I look like I'm a little bit in the shadows, but maybe given that it's a hot day, maybe that's quite appropriate.
Yeah, that's okay. We won't judge. So, today we are going to talk about a subject that we touched on last week briefly when we were talking about who is Oliver White, what is Oliver White, the current form of the Oliver White International and its associated regions do, and how do they help organizations. And we talked about, one of the core frameworks that we help organizations with is to implement integrated business planning. And then that raises a whole, another rabbit hole of what is planning. It's funny because a lot of the things we talk about, technically I would say there is a definition, but the definitions get argued a lot to this day. So it's quite interesting, but we will run through what our views on planning are and what makes good quality planning, and hopefully it's of interest, and hopefully maybe some people will say they don't agree, and then we can have a chat about that.
Yeah, definitely. No, it sounds like a great topic, and it is one that is a continual source of debate amongst our clients. When we're trying to teach them how to run a more successful business.
Yeah, definitely.
And there's a word we don't use so much, and I know we probably touch on this as we go through this session, Olga, is forecasting. And we tend to steer away from that term. We don't completely dismiss it because we do feel it has a role in a business. But the term planning, we believe, and particularly now, we're in 2026, and businesses ideally should be a lot more mature and should have better information available to them, that they should be planning their future and not just forecasting their future.
Agreed. So I'm going to kick off by this topic by asking you, based on your years of experience, what's your view on what planning is? How it helps organizations, and where you've seen good examples of planning helping organizations succeed.
Yeah. Okay. Well, planning to me, in its simplest sense, is really just a set of activities that an individual or a group of people or a total company can take to achieve a specific objectives. So it's very much predefined, predetermined, agreed upon things that we will do that will deliver a particular outcome.
Yeah.
And we would use past history as a basis to help us understand, well, when we did things in the past, this is what happened. If we were to do similar things in the future, would those things happen? And there's an oft-quoted saying that, history never repeats itself. But in organisations that we work with, you do actually find that to a greater or lesser degree, history does repeat itself, because there are certain businesses that just have a routine, and providing they've got the similar products and the similar pricing and the similar customer base, etc., then they tend to achieve similar results. But those results, once again, don't come by just naturally. You still have to plan to do some activities to be able to achieve those results. So it's a set of activities that are time phased into the future to help you achieve a result. That to me would be just the basic essence of a plan.
Yeah. I would add on, as a layer on top, it's about the decisions you're making as well. Like, ultimately, when you think about an organization, what do the leaders of a company do in order to try and achieve certain outcomes? Is they're deciding where they're going to allocate capital and people. So at its highest level, they're making these sorts of decisions. And as you go down to what should those, so once we allocate capital and then we put people in certain positions, what are they going to be deciding on in order to achieve? So those sets of activities that you said also include sets of decisions that need to happen in a uniform way to achieve that outcome. Yeah, and I guess that, for me, that's where that concept of where we see, and I would love to hear your opinion on this, where planning kind of falls over, is when plans are not integrated in businesses.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you mentioned earlier, are there any examples of where planning really does work well? And as you know, we work with lots of customers, and some are very good at planning, and some have obvious room for improvement. And even when they do get to a certain level of maturity, there's still gaps in planning capability. But for me, the best examples always of planning, and you'll remember last week when we talked about the origins of Oliver White, we started sort of down on the factory floor.
Yeah.
What is it we need to make, and so how do we know how much material we've got to be able to get to a particular finished good? So that is the birth of planning from an Oliver White perspective. But as we've gone through the decades, we've realised that it sort of links all the way back to strategy, and we talk a lot about linking strategy to execution. So Oliver White basically started at the execution end, but they've evolved all the way through. And so for me, the best examples are of where you've got strategic planning initially, and strategic planning done using the word you just used is in an integrated fashion. So we don't do a marketing strategic plan and a sales strategic plan and a finance strategic plan. We do a fully integrated business strategic plan. Sure, we have all of those functions, if you like, involved, but we're sourcing data and we're analysing it, and we're coming up with conclusions. And to your point, we're making decisions, because anybody that's doing good strategic planning knows that there's many different avenues you can travel down in terms of the direction you want the business to head in. So as a collective, as say a leadership team, making decisions about, well, what is our overarching objective, and what are our key strategies that we're planning, what are the activities, initiatives behind those, and how are we funding them, and how are we resourcing them, and then from there leading that into the execution then of the product plan and the sales and marketing plan and the supply plan and the financial plans and the human resources plans. So those organisations that do it really well, they get that concept of starting at the top and working all the way down and making sure that everything's connected. And when it is connected, it manifests itself in actual physical plans with activities that are designed to deliver an outcome.
Yeah. And then if I was to kind of then ask you, then what is forecasting? What would your answer be to that?
Yeah, well, forecasting for me is where you're where you're operating in an environment. There's internal elements that you can control, and there's external elements that you can't control. And I think it's those external elements that you can't control. So take the weather, for example. We can't plan for it to be sunny and 35 degrees today. We can only learn from history. So going back to that analysis of history, we can learn from history. We can look back over years and years and decades and see the trends, etc. And from there, we're able to take that data and using good capable people, good capable computer systems, we're able to model it, and we're able to put together a forecast.
Mm-hmm.
So a forecast is a prediction of what you think the future will look like, where you don't have an ability to impact it.
Yeah.
So if I work for the Bureau of Meteorology, all I've got is history. And I can't make it rain tomorrow. I can't make it stormy tomorrow. I can't make it windy tomorrow. I can only take what I've got from the past and try and reflect that into the future and give people an indication. So when it comes to planning, I still think there is a role for forecasting, and there's a term we use a lot at Oliver White, assumptions. So we talk about assumption-based planning, as you know.
Mm.
And so some of those assumptions are what we would call drivers, and so they're key factors that influence our results. So it could be the weather. If you're selling soft drinks, beverages, well, a hot day like this, you're probably going to sell more beverages than on a cold day. So that is a driver of your business. And then there are things called levers, which are things that we do. So we invest money. So we might do some promotional activity, some advertising. So I think it's those conditions that exist in the future, which are the assumptions we're making. So they're the things we're forecasting. So if one of the key drivers in our business, Olga, was the weather, it would be incumbent on us to make a prediction of what we think the weather would be like over the next 6 months or 12 months or 2 years, whatever our planning horizon is.
Yeah.
And you could say that is a forecast.
Yeah.
We are forecasting that the weather will be like this because the weather is important because it drives our business. So that's one application of the word forecast within a planning approach.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because in recent years, we've had, especially in the manufacturing space, this idea of these systems coming in and projecting out expected demand. And then, and then calling them advanced planning. So this, we use these SAP models and they're going to tell us what you're going to sell out into the future. And then that can help us optimize our supply plan and et cetera, et cetera. I don't know about you, but I think that those sort of systems are helpful in creating almost like an anchor to start a discussion about in an organization. Where I get uncomfortable is that those stat forecasts have no insight into those elements around what are you actually going to do as a business. Yeah. When we talk about those choices and those activities that we're going to be performing to ensure can't guarantee the outcome, but to give us a greater chance of success in achieving our objectives as an organization. And I think what I'm noticing now, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it, is this idea of where agility actually comes from. So some people are of the school of thought that, well, if we just get more real-time data and understand demand minute by minute that is coming through, then we'll be better at providing a better response in our supply chain. Whereas
my view on it is your supply chain is not an elastic
Yes.
mechanism, right? It has a certain capability inherently built into it in a manufacturer, even with the services environment. If you're providing a service, especially if it's people centered, there's only a certain amount of people that you'll have planned for and activated in your business to be available at any single point in time to provide a service. So just because there's this massive increase in demand, it's not like you can turn on a dime every single time that these changes in signals come in. So I get a bit nervous thinking about, oh, well, if we have this, responsiveness comes from being able to see more information more rapidly, whereas my school of thought is responsiveness comes from thinking further out about what we are going to do as a business, the outcomes we're wanting to generate from that activity, and understanding the uncertainty in the activities we're performing and the outcomes they could produce, and then being prepared for what we will do if they're not coming out the way that we expected them to. And because you're prepared, that preparedness is what allows for the agility, is my view. What's your take on that?
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And once again, it goes back to strategy, doesn't it? I mean, in terms of your product or service portfolio, what is the promise you're making to your customers for those products and services? And so then how do you set up your supply chain to be able to honour those promises that you're making to the customer? So if you're telling a customer we'll give you 100% on time in full at any time, which is basically what that means, 100% on time in full, you order any time and we will deliver on time in full, you've got to have an extremely flexible supply chain, which in many cases requires a lot of investment,
Yeah.
capital and people and inventory, which is costly. So once again, going back to decision making, when you're setting up your strategy in the first place, you have to be answering these questions. So if your strategy was, well, we're going to be providing a 1 week turnaround when we place an order, well, then having this sensitivity of data that you're just talking about isn't really necessary. Maybe in a weekly bucket sense it is,
Yeah.
but not on a daily or by hour or whatever. So it all depends upon your customer base, your product portfolio, your strategy, and what you can afford to do. And I think going back to your point on statistical forecasting, which once again is only using history and then projecting into the future, a stat forecast is exceptionally useful in terms of being indicative and telling you what the trends look like. So if you've done your statistical analysis and the trend lines tell you that everything's pretty steady, it's growing or it's declining or it's remaining flat, but there's no big spikes happening, no severe variances, well then you don't need to be reacting the way that you just talked about in terms of having such an agile supply chain because your customer base is quite predictable.
Yeah.
But it's where you have that unpredictability, as you say, those variations. How do we manage those? But once again, only by understanding the past and then planning the future can you actually address that particular topic, and it'll vary by company.
And this is where I think sometimes organizations can tie themselves up in knots as well, because when they formulate plans, the performance indicators that they put against achieving those plans can create a lot of noise. So if you're an organization that currently has a lot of volatility in demand, then putting a KPI against that plan that we must have 98% forecast accuracy at all times is not helpful. Because the way that you're in the current environment, you can't achieve that at this point in time. So until we understand where the volatility is coming from and understand that problem, That so for me, the view on that type of plan would be around we want to achieve a certain outcome, and that outcome is dependent on getting better control over demand variability. Then part of your plan should be getting around that problem statement and solving for that variability in demand, and then you can start measuring to your 98% forecast accuracy. A lot of organizations just go, well, best in class organizations have this level of aggregate forecast accuracy, so we must put ourselves there. So we're also not looking at organizations that are disconnected are not looking at what are the right measures that tell us, one, we're moving in the right direction and going to achieve what we set out to achieve, and two, make sure that the different components of those the integration points are being measured for the right responses. So classic examples around, like you said, well, if our plan is to have 100% service levels, but it's also to have minimal inventory, then we have conflicting measures, because to have bare minimum inventory but 100% service would mean that the forecast needs to be basically 100% accurate. So that you're getting all these like tension points, because you're not understanding that, oh, actually our primary objective is that the customer is always satisfied. We know that there's this volatility in our ability to understand how our demand is going to be shaped, and therefore we need to sacrifice working capital to achieve that goal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So,
right?
and once again, we should be planning to do that. Okay, so if there is that volatility, and we want higher levels of customer service, and we want to achieve that plan, well then, if there's high levels of volatility, so this is when it gets into the word forecasting comes into play, because when we talk about planning, we talk about planning at the aggregate level, but then when we want to get down to detail level, to SKUs, we talk about taking that aggregate and creating a SKU forecast, and we know those forecasts are not going to be 100% accurate, so we have to have some ability to be able to manage the variability once again to those. And a lot of people that are operating in this world would know there's only two ways that you can really manage that. One is through, as you say, working capital, finished goods, extra finished goods available, or extra capacity, spare capacity available. So that if demand does go up rapidly, you can switch on production and you can produce more and you can satisfy that demand. Or if you don't have that capability, you're holding extra inventory. But we're planning to do it. That's the critical bit. It's not happening.
We're making those decisions in advance. Yeah.
And so we know there's going to be the nature of the business we might be in. We know there's going to be variability every week, every day, and we're trying behind the scenes to improve the accuracy of that. But in the meantime, we've got these strategies we've planned to actually accommodate providing high levels of customer service.
Yeah. And then you see these like really interesting behaviors, and we'll talk about budgeting and the behaviors that it produces another time, because I think it's a really interesting topic. And I've seen this play out multiple times, because budgets are built on certain year-end positions.
Yes.
You'll see that you have this, some companies that have this, we're going to maintain higher working capital right up until the end of the year, and then we'll just like drastically reduce our working capital, knowing that you haven't solved for that demand volatility piece that we talked about earlier. And then they go into the new fiscal year and they've hamstrung themselves from delivering their first quarter results. Everyone's sitting around going, why is service shot to zero? And no one understands that these are integrated decisions.
Yes, exactly.
So, and this is interesting, right? Because what this is talking about there are multiple plans that exist in an organization at any given point in time. So how do we know that if we deliver all these things in our different functional silos, that we're actually going to achieve our goals? How do you do that?
Yeah.
And that's where governance frameworks like integrated business planning start to step in, right?
Yes.
And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions, personally, is that integrated business planning is about generating the plans, whereas actually integrated business planning is about understanding that they are integrated and that there's governance to ensure that if there's misalignments happening and we're going to catch ourselves out and we're going to have an issue, that we can resolve it with enough time, knowing that these decisions happen on certain horizons.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just a very pragmatic approach, you know, of managing the dynamics in the business world, isn't it? It's you know, we set a strategy or we set a business plan or we set a budget, and that's something that we do at one point in time, and we write the lovely plans, the very specific things we're going to do. We've got it underpinned by assumptions, which are our predictions of the future conditions. But we know that that's one choice we've made of an outcome in the future, which may or may not occur. And generally speaking, they usually don't occur. They're either better or they're worse.
Yeah.
And so good business practice is to say, well, we do operate in a dynamic world, and sometimes those dynamics are more drastic. You know, we always go back to COVID 6 years ago. That was an example of a very drastic deviation in certainty. But there's always going to be some level of upside and downside. And so in a very pragmatic business world, you would say, as a leadership team, we should be managing those plans every month.
Yeah.
Can we continually give ourselves confidence that the plans we put in place are still likely to materialise?
Yeah. Which goes back to a mentality of you don't control the outcome, you control the actions you take.
Yes.
And there's an expectation of a certain outcome. And this is the trap we need to kind of avoid, is that we're tethered to, all these activities are going to achieve a certain outcome. Actually, they could achieve a certain range of outcomes. And if we're getting signals that we're not going to be happy with that profile, we need to have these sub plans in place to address that, which goes back to contingency and understanding uncertainty, etc. Okay, so I think the main thing that I would reflect on from everything that we've discussed, we have just not discussed a system, right, when it comes to planning. We've discussed
humans.
We've discussed how we are going to organize ourselves and what we are going to do as an integrated organization to achieve things in the market, basically. And they will have certain outcomes that we can't control, but we're trying to influence as much as possible. We're trying to exercise our agency as much as possible.
Yes.
So if you want an Oliver White perspective, you can get the best system ever, but it doesn't mean that your plans are great. So, which is a very difficult pill to swallow, right?
Yes.
So there's been good conversation, and like there's more to this, right? It's quite an in-depth topic, but at a cursory level, I think it's really important to understand that you can't forgo your choices as a leader of where you're putting people's focus, and what impact that's going to have on being able to deliver the outcomes that you want. So in closing, Peter, because we've been talking for nearly half an hour, I want to share some characteristics that I've defined as being required to achieve a high quality plan. So I wrote this small blog post late last year because I was having lots of arguments with people that forecasts are not plans.
You better put the definitive word down in writing. Huh?
So
Yeah,
I've
okay.
tried to write Olga's Law. No, I just started going, okay, just thinking about it. Like, what can some of the characteristics we can do to try and give better clarity about what we're talking about, right? So I wrote this thing and said, okay, what defines a whole high quality plan? I said, it's not just about having tasks and timelines. It's about the structure, governance, and adaptability that surrounds that plan. So we have the tasks and timelines, but we also know how we're going to maneuver should we have to, right? Because the world isn't static.
Yeah.
So the first thing I've said is that we need ownership. So there's owners of plans, and their role is really clear on how they formulate, what they're allowed to do in order to formulate and ensure that the plan is executed. The second one I said is that there needs to be a link. We're talking about operational plan. So a link to your strategic plan. So it's clear that if you have a strategic roadmap, that these operational roadmaps integrate. It's a subset of the strategic plan. And then it needs to be documented in some way. It can't just sit in people's heads. And that those actions and roles and decisions, etc., need to be time phased. So part of planning is sometimes you don't need to make the decisions at this very point in time, but we know that there's a horizon in which decisions need to be made, and that needs to be really clear. There's a way to document progress as well to that plan. We need to make sure the plan is valid, so the organisation has the resource, the capability, and the funds to execute it. So if you have plans that assume you have infinite marketing spend,
Yes.
probably not valid. If your plan assumes that you can hire more people than exist in your country, probably not valid. Then the next one I had was around being aligned and integrated. So integrated into the dependent plans and making sure there's no conflicting priorities. The ability to manage uncertainty of the plan through assumptions.
Yep.
And then making sure that the plan is communicated
Yes.
in some way. So everyone understands their role in delivering the plan, and then that it is reviewed and revised. So it's not something that just happens once a year, because like we said, markets are dynamic. So there is some sort of mechanism to make sure that plans are updated with the changing environment, and they can incorporate lessons learned from the last time we touched the plan.
Yeah.
So those were the 8 things that I went through. So if we go through them, so ownership, strategic link, documentation, validity, alignment, management, uncertainty, communication, and revision.
Brilliant.
Do you think that's a comprehensive list, or would you add one?
No, I've got
no?
nothing to add there, Olga, because it's very comprehensive.
Very comprehensive.
And you know, the unfortunate thing is that a lot of organisations don't have as comprehensive a list as that. There'll be pockets in an organisation that are doing it. And the other point I would add is that when we use the term plan, planning has application across all layers in the organisation.
Yeah.
We talked about strategy. So when you're doing strategic planning, you're typically not in as much granular level detail, but you're relying on that granular level detail to be collected, to be synthesized, to be, you know, the data to be turned into information, into knowledge, into insight, so that when you're doing your strategic planning, you've got those key insights to guide the business. But then as you move down through the layers in the organization, everybody should be planning.
Yes.
But it eventually gets to a much more detailed level of granularity. So if you're thinking about delivering products to a supermarket today, there's a delivery schedule, which is very detailed. So how is all of that connected together to make sure an organisation has success? And all of those key characteristics you've just described are fundamental critical success factors for having a well-planned organisation.
Yeah, across all layers, yeah. I think the bit that people get a little bit stuck in is, you know, treating execution as not almost like a subset of plans, because yes, it's where the things probably like higher velocity of decision making, and you're getting closer to the point again where you're going to see the outcome, but there is planning elements in that zone.
Yeah.
You'll get, it's just like the feedback loop of I pull a lever and I get a response is much faster than the other layers of planning. You know, like in a strategic plan, if you decide that we're going to, based on a new, we're going to open up a new driver of growth, and therefore we need to create all this capability behind us, the timeline to realize that is much longer than I put in promotion to my customer and then I get an order. So it's just, but it's still the same mindset that you need to be in around, is everyone coordinated to catch that demand and supply it in the end?
Yeah, exactly. In those characteristics, you did talk about performance, didn't you? A performance measurement.
Yeah. It's through the revision. Yeah,
because it's a critical question, which unfortunately, once again, a lot of organisations don't ask is, did we achieve the plan? And look, I guess they do ask that question, but they're typically thinking about, did we achieve the budget? Did we get the budget for the month? But they're not actually really talking about the plan or the plans that support the achievement of that budget number.
Yeah. And this is quite interesting because I've seen plans that are, well, we just need to grow X% versus last year. Well, okay, that's not a plan. So then all they're doing is the same things that they were doing last year, but then saying it should grow more than the price. But why? Like, what are you doing to move that dial? Because if anything, if you're doing the exact same things as last year, your growth in, like, assuming if all the market dynamics stay the same, I would assume would be zero. We create these weird anchors. Whereas I would rather say, I have a plan, and our goal of that plan is to deliver a certain level of growth versus the prior year. And if I'm not achieving that level of growth, like measuring that performance, then something needs to change. Something's critically wrong in our assumptions that needs to be reviewed and revised, and then our plans need to be tweaked according to that insight. The organizations that can get that virtuous cycle of momentum and get better cycle after cycle after cycle are the ones that have that well-documented plan. They measure what they did versus that and looked at the outcomes and go, oh, actually, we thought X, but what happened was Y. Next time, our next series needs to tweak all these elements because then we're going to get better outcomes. So that volatility that we talked about right at the start starts decreasing because you get a better understanding of how your business performs under different conditions because you've made those assumptions and then you've executed your plan and then reviewed that performance. Whereas a lot of organizations just get stuck on the variance analysis.
So you're very passionate about this topic,
I'm
Olga.
super passionate about it. Yes.
And it just, look, and as we've discussed earlier, as this conversation ebbs and flows, it takes you into different parts of the business and different topics, and you can't cover everything in one session.
No. We've got a few things that we could talk about next time based on this. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope that it's ruffled a few feathers. Because I think we've become a little bit complacent when it comes to how much agency we have over how our business performs.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Any closing thoughts from yourself, Peter, before we sign off?
Well, just from a plan, because we've been talking about planning, and I think when people I'm having conversations with about planning, they always tend to focus on the commercial side of the business. What's our forecast accuracy? Are we achieving? Are we selling enough, etc., etc. But the planning piece is more than that. The planning piece is the whole business. It's the new product development. It's managing the actual portfolio itself to make sure it's still relevant. It's planning supply to make sure we've got capability. It's managing the finances and not just doing the basic bookkeeping or the P&L. It's ensuring you've got enough money to to run the business. and the working capital discussions, planning, all of that, and then the people side, the human resources side, the information technology side. So
Yes.
the planning is all encompassing. It's not just about one particular part of the business, and they're all relying on each other.
Yes, 100%. The integration of their decision making is really critical.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you again.
Yeah, thank
Been a
you.
great conversation. So, just as a reminder, I will leave some links in the show notes, particularly around the blog I talked about. I have a few resources on forecasting versus planning that I think will be useful. Feel free to leave comments on your thoughts around our discussion, and please do like and subscribe because that will keep you abreast of the new episodes and more content that's to come. And if you want to email us, you can do so at information@oliverwhite.com. Well, thanks again, Peter, and thanks everyone. We'll see you again next time.
Thanks for listening, and if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe on YouTube. If you're listening on Spotify, it would be great if you could leave us a 5-star review, as it really helps others discover the podcast. We'll be back soon with more real-world conversations on how you can build a better business by design.